Welcome everyone to another episode of Early Days, where entrepreneurship meets storytelling, proudly presented by Prowse Barrette LLP. Get ready to be inspired by the individuals at the forefront of business. And our guest today is Jeff Tetz, CEO of Results Business Consultants. And what a business journey he has been on. Didn't start out pretty at all, but boy, oh boy, have they turned it into an incredible company that could help you on your business journey. So stay with us. Jeff Tetz, CEO of Results. And I said, when you walked in, great to meet you, but I feel like I already know you because I follow you on social media.
Yeah, I feel the same way. And I think that's more and more common these days. You sort of, I have to do a check all the time now. I feel bad not knowing if I've actually met somebody in person or not, with just how much we interact with folks we've never actually met.
And we're going to find out, because Results is the name of the company, which I love the name, by the way, because it says it all, doesn't it?
Yeah, you can't really hide when you have a name like that.
You have to share, to start off, a key turning point that led you to where you are today with this great company.
Sure. Well, so there's a couple. So the most recent one is I got fired from my job. And so I don't think I would be sitting here today if I didn't get fired from my real estate development job about 14 and a half years ago. And so I was literally on the streets looking for a job, and a headhunter, a local headhunter, after a few weeks of trying to find me something, he told me he had this really intriguing opportunity. It was a group from Calgary expanding into Edmonton. And it was a leadership coaching business. And I have a hockey background, so I spent a lot of time in hockey, and I've spent my professional life in sales. And this opportunity was start the Edmonton practice for Results, basically from scratch. And I was at a point in my life where I was willing to take a risk on something because anything was better than being unemployed. And it seemed to be a good match of my coaching background and my sales and marketing background. And sort of here we are today.
When they explained Results, the company, to you, how did they explain it?
They kind of explained it to me as though it was a group of people that serve as hockey coaches for leadership teams. And so that got my attention. And I love relationships and people, but I love coaching and seeing people realize their potential more than I've ever enjoyed sales. Sales is just kind of like an ends to a means. And I was in some ways naturally good at it. And then as I got naturally good at it, started applying myself and got better at it that way. But I was really drawn to their purpose, making good teams great, helping people unleash their potential. And so those are really the foundational things of what we do.
So when your first time working with a company, it's kind of new because you've always worked with sports teams, and now you're working with the business community. Do you reflect back and go, the first time you go, whoa, how did I bamboozle them through that?
Yeah, that's a great word, because there was a long time that I felt like an imposter doing it. And I've always been, I think, good at connecting people and building relationships and influencing folks to do things that are good for them, albeit maybe a little bit uncomfortable. But I didn't really have a lot of business acumen when I started. I mean, I do have a business degree, but what you learn in school theoretically really pales in comparison to what you learn in the real world. And so it was a steep learning curve. And there were many days, I think, in the first 2 years where I felt like I was just never going to be able to figure it out.
But you must have had some wins. What were those?
Yeah, well, the early wins were just convincing people to come and sit down with me and listen to what I was doing now. And then the other wins in the early days is we're really big proponents of community building. And so we bring people together for small and large events all the time. And in the early days, because it's a long sales cycle, especially when nobody knows you and your brand, we would host large events at local facilities, and we would invite 120 to 150 senior business leaders and do a 90-minute workshop and hopefully impress them enough that they want to spend more time with us. So those are really my early wins, was just convincing people to come to a free workshop. And that shows you how low the bar was at that time, Jackie, because that was enough to satisfy the partners in Calgary to sort of keep me around long enough for more substantial wins.
And you said sales wasn't the thing you were most crazy about, but that is an important element, because you had to get people in the room.
Yeah, that's right. And I think you asked about turning points in career. So the other turning point I have is my whole life, I think the trajectory of my life was sort of formulated back in grade 9 because I started a shuttle bus business, organizing shuttle buses from Fort Saskatchewan to Edmonton Eskimo home games because I loved football so much. And what I realized in my life is if I connect the dots in hindsight, like, Steve Jobs, I think he said it, at the Stanford commencement speech he gave in 2008, you can only connect these dots of our lives looking backwards, of course. Well, one of those dots was in my life, I have always gotten other people enthusiastic about things I was enthusiastic about. I never looked at it as sales, but looking back, I was my calling, I think, has always been sales and marketing without sort of knowing it for a while.
That's really remarkable. That was grade 10 when you put that
grade
together?
9.
Grade 9.
Yeah, I was grade 9. And many years later in university, I did it on a larger scale to the point where the Eskimos actually offered me a job. So honestly, if not for that silly little grade 9 shuttle bus idea, I never had the foggiest idea what I was going to do with my business degree, what I wanted to do in my career. And it was just this silly school bus thing going to football games that got me a job with the Eskimos and working closely with Hugh Campbell and everyone there. And then that led to a job with the Oilers. And my whole life, literally, this is not hyperbole, the trajectory of my life was completely changed because of Edmonton Eskimo football and a school bus.
But then how did you get into the hockey world with teams? If football seemed to be your love, what was the hockey connection?
Well, I played hockey. And so the connection to hockey, of course, Oilers and Eskimos growing up, those were the things. And I loved the Oilers. But the thing that I loved more was going to football games. So as exciting as watching the Oilers win Stanley Cups in the 80s as a young kid, there's nothing that compared to the exhilaration of a 35-degree day in late June, early July, and Henry Gizmo Williams returning a punt for a touchdown in front of 55,000 fans. I remember,
Gizmo.
That's exactly right. And so that was the thing that sort of got me hooked on football. And again, the enthusiasm can be infectious. And so I got so excited about football games that we used to pack my dad's van growing up with 15 kids before seatbelt laws. And 15 kids in a van became 75 kids in a school bus. That was sort of, in my mind, was the natural progression.
Working for Hugh Campbell, as you talk about teaching others the art of leadership, I bet you he was a great leader.
He was. And I was so lucky to be able to work for the football club when I did, because I was there for the 99 and 2000 seasons. They weren't great on the field. They did make the playoffs in both years, but they were still in the midst of the longevity streak they had for consecutive playoff appearances. But it was such a small organization, still led by the great people. So Tom Higgins was there reporting into Hugh Campbell. Don Matthews was the coach, and that was sort of on the downside of Don Matthews' coaching career, but just really cool to be around those people. And Hugh Campbell, again, just a legend. And as I earned my stripes on the sales side of the business, it bought me more credibility, I think, for Hugh. So I would often speak to him during practices and in the office and passing in the hallway. And he was always really curious about my insights. And that was one of the things I took about Hugh. I was just this young kid, not quite done university. And here's Hugh Campbell, legitimately interested in what I had to say. And I think that was one of the leadership lessons I always take with me from Hugh. And he was always, as accomplished as he was just so mild-mannered and quiet and humble. And he only, shared wisdom with you when he felt it was appropriate, not to overshare it. And he is a remarkable man.
So now that you've moved into this new role with results, what has been the most rewarding aspect for you helping companies build great leadership?
Yeah, so it comes in lots of shapes and sizes, but I think the common denominator, Jackie, is when you see people establish a new belief system for themselves and recognize that with just small, subtle tweaks applied over time, they can completely transform their results. And because people come to us, generally we work with companies that are quite successful. They're standing on their own. They've demonstrated success over many, many years, but there's something that changes. Either they've grown so quickly that they don't have the proper structure to maintain that growth, or just the phase of life changes. Somebody starts a business and then 30 years later, what they want from their business is not the same. And so they're trying to run it as though they're still in their mid-20s and it's 5 times the size, and it becomes exhausting. And there's nothing, there are some things worse, but in a business context, to own a business but not be able to create freedom of choice in your life, in your most, in your most precious later years, I think that's a real tragedy. And so I think when it works the way it's supposed to, the thing that really lights me up is our work gives business leaders freedom. And how they choose that freedom is completely up to them. If they want to work more hours, or if freedom to them is seeing their kids' soccer practice, or freedom is just working on more exciting priorities while the next generation takes things and run with it, I just think freedom is one of the most ultimate gifts we can have.
Especially nowadays, it seems more than ever, actually.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the birth of the BEX Summit. This fascinates me because I know people like Grant Fedork from Leading Edge Physiotherapy. A lot of them head down to this. How did you guys come up with this summit?
Luck, accident, and just sort of taking a small opportunistic risk, I suppose. And I mentioned earlier that part of our growth strategy is really built through community. And because of that, we have brought in thought leaders from all over North America that have written best-selling books on leadership. And one of the gentlemen that we've done extensive work through over the years is from Gainesville, Florida, and his name is John Spence. He wrote a fantastic book called Awesomely Simple. And it's literally these awesomely simple habits and processes that if you apply to your business, it'll dramatically improve. And we had done some work with John in Alberta. And it would have been in late 2014, he emailed me and said he had a really odd gap in his schedule. He was going to be delivering a 2-day session to the Saskatchewan Real Estate Board. And usually he has to fly to his next gig, but he had a 4-day break. And he just said, hey, what are the chances you could just come down and visit with me? And I still have the email. My immediate response was, John, I can definitely come down and spend a couple of days with you and your wife, Sheila, and have a visit. But I got a better idea. And then I picked up the phone and said, would you be game to do a 1-day workshop in Banff? And we'll parlay that and combine that with a Super Bowl party because it was Super Bowl Sunday the day before. And he said, you know what? See what you can do. So I had to sell it to my superiors. And we basically put a $1,000 event together in Banff. It included a Super Bowl party, a 1-day workshop with John Spence, and the drinks and the food and all of that kind of stuff. And so just out of an opportunistic chance, we created this 1-day retreat that has now grown into a BEX Summit that celebrated 10 years and sells out every year with over 325 business leaders.
It's incredible. And you started in Banff, now you're in Kananaskis. Yep. Why choose Kananaskis?
Oh, lots of reasons. Number one, Ron Pomeroy that owns the Pomeroy Lodging Group is just a fantastic person and a great partner in the event. The second part is when you're in Kananaskis, you are there immersed together. You can't go to other restaurants, you can't go to other hotels. So you hunker down for a couple of days with everybody else that's there. And we basically buy out the entire resort. So everybody that you see for those 2 days is part of the BEX Summit. So I think there's just something about that in terms of relationship building and connecting on a deeper level with people that makes the experience special.
And it sells out, you mentioned. What are some home runs where you just, that you've made a connection with some businesses that really turned into something? Yeah,
well, so there's 2 ways I would answer that, I think, Jackie. So I think what we've learned about the summit is it accelerates trust building, because we might be selling strategic planning and business insights and business habits, but what we're really selling is trust and confidence, and we're selling a new belief system for people. And if you're going to, the blood, sweat, and tears of growing a business, if you're going to entrust an outsider to come and help you grow the thing, like one of the things that you love the most in your life, that's a deep level of trust. And I think what happens is when we get 325 people at the BEX Summit for a couple days, they interact with our incredible clients. They sort of sell our services on our behalf without us asking. We're so fortunate. But they also get a chance just to see the way our team behaves in the wild. And when they see that we're not that wild, we're well behaved and trustworthy. But I think you get a sense of somebody's authenticity in a couple of days. And if we can be genuine and authentic and just be real with people, that is just so much of the get to know you process for us. But the other way I would answer it, I am more excited about the connections the attendees make with each other. And even just this past year, we've got some very intentional networking sessions that we run at Beck's, where we give people some prompting questions, so they don't have to figure it out on their own. They can skip the small talk, which is what most people are craving these days, right? Let's get into the real conversations. But two of the people that met this year, again, didn't know each other at all coming into it. And through this intentional networking, they got just randomly paired up. And 2 weeks later, one of them had a need that the other person a problem that the other person could solve. And they did a $100,000 transaction 14 days later, purely because they met at Beck's in a networking portion.
I love that. Yeah, that's what's your hope for the future as you move? Because you got to make it. You got to keep probably tweaking it and changing it every year to keep everybody intrigued by it.
Yeah, for sure. And so, believe me, I know this is on a way different scale, but I just love like comparables and analogies. And I am such a huge fan of Saturday Night Live. And I imagine Lorne Michaels, right? 1975, Saturday Night Live launches, and just how he's kept it relevant and changed with the times. I love those kinds of stories. And so for Beck's, like, this is as close as I'll ever get to a Saturday Night Live producer role in my entire life. So for me, it's just trying to find ways to continue to make it a useful experience for the target audience. So that's number one. And if you can just do that, I think it buys you time and it exposes you to windows of opportunity nobody could predict today. And so that's my number one hope. I also think we would probably like to see it grow to other markets. Maybe we do more than one per year. Like maybe we do one on the West Coast. Maybe we do one down east at some point. So those are some of the things that will be on the list. And then even this year, we are launching local versions. Because it sells out so quick, one of the biggest pieces of feedback is, Jeff, we love coming to this with our executive team, but could you do something local so it's more accessible and a little bit more affordable? So we're doing a one-day Beck's Connects session in Edmonton at the end of October and in Calgary. So those are sort of a couple things that we're trying to experiment right now, Jackie.
Oh, what a huge success. You've worked with countless companies and leaders over the years. Do you see a pattern, one or two common patterns that you see from these successful leaders?
From the six, yes. So, there's lots of different things that I would see, but I think some of the things that stand out, Jackie, is what I've learned is silence is safe. And in most organizations, the naturally occurring phenomenon is people keep their opinions to themselves. And it keeps the individual safe because they don't have to take a risk. Head down, just get your job done, don't get noticed. But the organizations lose a tremendous amount of intellectual property, of ingenuity, of resourcefulness, because people have amazing things to say and amazing things to share. And although it is uncomfortable at first, the best leaders that I've had a chance to meet and work with are courageous in asking for advice, asking for feedback, being openly fallible, sharing their mistakes and their tales from the trenches. And they understand that if they tap into the insights more and more of those around them, everybody wins. And so there's humility in there, there's a lack of arrogance, there's a courageousness to confront our blind spots. And I think those are some of the things that really separate exceptional leaders from everybody else.
Yeah, because if you stay quiet, that's a great piece of advice. You stay quiet, no one will ever know that what you have in you. Yeah.
And I think the easiest way to relate it too is I try to, when I'm having conversations like with myself and when I'm having conversations with others, it's to remind ourselves of what it used to feel like before you had seniority and influence. And think of all the times you had clever, creative ideas, things that were really compelling to you personally, but you never had an outlet to share them. And just imagine, number one, how exhilarating would it have been for you as a younger employee to just be asked what you thought, even if they never did anything with your ideas, but how much that would have even just ramped up the engagement level that you had for the place and time that you were in then.
For you personally, Jeff, was there a moment where you went, a light bulb moment? Did that change the way you lead?
So I think that process is ongoing. I think it is. I'm a huge information and research junkie. So if you show me the data behind something, I am more likely to adopt that thing like immediately. And I think that learning from, I work with incredible colleagues that have vast business experience and the collection of clients that we've worked with, and then all the thought leaders we get to interact with. So I'm constantly sort of pulling from those three main sources. But I think it's learning that, humility and fallibility, and it's okay to be human and vulnerable, and that you don't have to have all the answers. I think that might be obvious to some, but to me it wasn't. Those are unconventional ideas that separate great leaders from everybody else. Because I think I grew up thinking that once you're in a senior position, like if you're a CEO or on a leadership team, it's like, okay, we have the answers. We impart this wisdom onto everybody else in the organization, and away we go. And it's kind of like being a kid and you think the adults have all the answers. Then you become one, and you're like, whoa.
Yeah, whoa.
Was I ever out to lunch? So I think those are some of the things that stand out for me.
Do you have an example of a leader that you've worked with that really transformed themselves or their team in a really, really powerful way?
Yeah, it's funny. I don't always like to single people out because there's so many great examples. But one of the examples that comes to mind for me is Holly Jones. And Holly Jones, she is the second generation business leader of Alberta Carpet and Furnace, and they own Page the Cleaners, just a wildly successful family. And she is so humble and growth-minded and so capable. I don't think she gives herself enough credit, but I think with Holly, we had a chance to work with her a number of years ago, and it wasn't actually our services that really changed her business. It was things that she did after we started working with her. But I think what we helped her with was a bit of a mindset shift, and we helped her discover some other methodologies that have really changed the way that she leads. And that would be her story to tell. But seeing the way that Holly shows up these days, she's more confident. She shares business advice and stories on LinkedIn almost on a daily basis. I just think I would hold her up with anybody in terms of how much she has grown and the impact that she's making on her team.
I love that. And what would you say to someone, let's say, that was just stepping into a leadership role right now?
So I would say prepare yourself for a lifelong journey of learning and self-discovery. I would say surround yourself with people that are on similar journeys and have been where you aspire to go. So those are really important. I mean, and then dovetailing with that, Jackie, is just get more comfortable with being uncomfortable in terms of asking for help. Asking for help is one of the hardest things that human beings do. I mean, even just if you think about people we've known in our own lives that were struggling with something, even if it wasn't that serious, all the way up to being very serious, it's not easy for people to ask for help. And the reality is people are more willing to provide it than we often give them credit for. Some mistakes we have to learn on our own, but there's a whole set of other mistakes that you shouldn't have to repeat, and you can learn from other people's experience and wisdom.
Don't you find that as leaders, though, sometimes you think you carry the weight all on your own shoulders, so you keep more inside, it seems sometimes, when the stress gets there?
Yeah, I think it comes back to what I said earlier, that sort of silence is safe. I think we're kind of wired to not want to expose our vulnerability, right? And I think we've learned enough now through Brené Brown and everybody else that vulnerability is really courage, right? And I love what Brené Brown says is that when we look at people that we really admire, they are usually raw and vulnerable. But when we look at ourselves about being raw and vulnerable, we view it as a strength in other people, a quality that we admire, but we view it as a weakness in ourselves. So I think it's giving ourselves permission to be like, hey, the people that we admire most, if we just show up like those folks, because that's my other piece of advice for people starting out as a leader, is to list the 5 to 10 people that you most admire in your life that are in leadership positions. List their names, and then under their names, write down all the characteristics and attributes that make you admire them. And if you just start off by saying, whoa, here's the patterns and themes amongst those 5 to 10 people, I'm just going to do whatever I can to show up more like those people every day, and you'll be well on your way.
You are obviously a ferocious reader. And you love, and I love that you're still growing yourself. I can feel that's why you continue to read, continue to research, continue to serve your clients, because you're always growing. You never stop.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, I don't know why, but I feel lucky to have sort of been born with an inferiority complex. Like imposter syndrome is a real thing, and I think I've learned to use it to my advantage. I never feel like I'm ready for much, and I always feel a little bit behind. I always feel like I have to earn my seat at the table, but I think in a healthy way. So I do get stress and anxiety when I have something important I have to do, but I'm always so nervous about losing my footing or losing my place and not being relevant anymore. And I think a lot of those things motivate me to want to learn and grow. And I do enjoy those things, but I think it's also motivated by a little bit of fear. But I believe it's a healthy amount of fear. I think I've learned to sort of harness it in mainly healthy ways.
How can people learn more about the work you're doing, or if they want to get involved in Beck's, especially in the one in October here in Edmonton? Or?
Sure. So a couple ways is track me down on LinkedIn. That seems to be the healthiest platform these days. It used to be others, but definitely LinkedIn. So connect with me there for conversations, and I'm always sort of sharing and testing ideas there and letting people have a chance to let me know what they think about those ideas. And then the other way would be our website. So they can track us down at unleashresults.com.
Oh, I like that. Unleash Results. If you could go back to your first day at Results, what advice would you give yourself?
Enjoy the struggle.
Ooh, enjoy the struggle.
Yeah. Here's something I've learned about life is when we are struggling, we spend a good portion of our time dreaming of a day where we will no longer be in it. Once we are past the struggle, we spend a good portion of our time looking back saying, wasn't that fun?
We do, actually. Some days. I love it. Thank you so much, Jeff. It's so fun to get to know you, and best of luck as they continue with Beck's and Results and the whole shebang.
Yeah, thank you, Jackie. This is such a pleasure.
As today's insightful conversation comes to an end with Jeff, we hope you're leaving with valuable takeaways for your business. Special thanks to our presenting sponsor, Prowse Barrette, for those moments when you need expert legal advice or support from business litigation to environmental law. Remember, Prowse Barrette LLP is just a call away. Keep pushing forward and make your entrepreneurial dreams a reality. We'll see you in the next episode of Early Days.
This series is proudly produced by the team at Road 55. Road 55 creates content that connects. For more information, visit our website at road55.ca.